From the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, Divinity and Divine Service. We're on verse 7. 127. The hits just keep on coming. Another classic verse. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janyatyashu Vairagyam Jnanam Chayadahaitakam. Translation: by rendering devotional service unto the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Those who consider devotional service to the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna to be something like material emotional affairs may argue that in the revealed scriptures, sacrifice, charity, austerity, knowledge, mystic powers, and similar other processes of transcendental realization are recommended. According to them, bhakti, or the devotional service of the Lord, is meant for those who cannot perform the high-grade activities. Generally, it is said that the bhakti cult is meant for the Shudras, Vaishyas, and the less intelligent woman class. That is not the actual fact. The bhakti cult is the topmost of all transcendental activities, and therefore it is simultaneously sublime and easy. It is sublime for the pure devotees who are serious about getting in contact with the Supreme Lord, and it is easy for the neophytes. We're just on the threshold of the house of bhakti. To achieve the contact of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, is a great science. And it is open for all living beings, including the Shudras, Vaishyas, women, and even those lower than the low-born Shudras, so what to speak of the high-class men like the qualified Brahmanas and the great self-realized kings. The other high-grade activities designated as sacrifice, charity, austerity, etc., are all corollary factors following the pure and scientific bhakti cult. The principles of knowledge and detachment are two important factors in the path of transcendental realization. The whole spiritual process leads to perfect knowledge of everything, material and spiritual, and the results of such perfect knowledge are that one becomes detached from material affection and becomes attached to spiritual activities. Becoming detached from material things does not mean becoming inert altogether, as men with a poor fund of knowledge think. Naish karma means not undertaking activities that will produce good or bad effects. Negation does not mean negation of the positive. Negation of the non-essentials does not mean negation of the essential. Similarly, detachment from material forms does not mean nullifying the positive form. The bhakti cult is meant for realization of the positive form. When the positive form is realized, the negative forms are automatically eliminated. Therefore, with the development of the bhakti cult, with the application of positive service to the positive form, one naturally becomes detached from inferior things and becomes attached to superior things. Similarly, the bhakti cult, being the supermost occupation of the living being, leads him out of material and sense enjoyment. That is the sign of a pure devotee. He is not a fool, nor is he engaged in the inferior energies, nor does he have material values. This is not possible by dry reasoning. It actually happens by the grace of the Almighty. In conclusion, one who is a pure devotee has all other good qualities, namely knowledge, detachment, etc. But one who has only knowledge or detachment is not necessarily well acquainted with the principles of the bhakti cult. Bhakti is the supermost occupation of the human being. Om Jnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shlakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Panchakalpatarupyascha Kripasitruphya Cha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare. The Bhagavad Gita, please. Thank you. So we're hearing about the bhakti cult. Cult is short for culture. That's how the word is used here. The original usage of the word. The culture of bhakti. And Prabhupada is talking about how the culture of bhakti is ultimately about cultivation of the positive, by which, as a side effect, you have negation of the negative. That which is useless is let go of. And so that's knowledge and detachment are concomitant factors. Now, this relationship is there in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna talks about in the 18th chapter. He says in the 54th verse, Brahma bhuta prasannatma na shochiti na kamshati samasarveshu bhuteshu at bhaktim levate param. He gives the qualifications of somebody who's already liberated, who's already situated in knowledge and detachment. He says, one who is transcendently situated at once realizes the supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. They never lament or desire to have anything. They're equally disposed to every living entity. In that state, they attain pure devotional service to me. And the next verse, he says that pure devotional service is the only way by which he can be known as he is. So, as we'll hear about later in this chapter, Brahman, spiritual reality, is most fully expressed in the form of the personality of Godhead. And what that means for us practically in terms of our practice is that when we practice bhakti, not just hearing about the difference between spirit and matter, but practicing bhakti towards Krishna, practicing devotion towards the supreme personal source, the benefits of being liberated from matter, i.e. detachment and knowledge, even if we don't have them yet, become available to us by Krishna's grace. And Srila Prabhupada talks about that in the purport. He says here, this is a sign of a pure devotee. They're not a fool, i.e. they have knowledge, nor they engage in the inferior energies, nor do they have material values, i.e. they have detachment from matter. This is not possible by dry reasoning. One cannot come to this stage sustainably by practice of intellectual adjustment alone. Prabhupada says, it actually happens by the grace of the Almighty. It's a relational process. It actually happens by Krishna's mercy. That's a fundamental difference between what we're doing and what Prabhupada is addressing here and ultimately criticizing as an inferior path. What we're doing is actually a form of surrender. It's relying on Krishna's support. It's directly acknowledging the presence and the supremacy of the Supreme Person and asking for his help and relating it to him in a form of service. All other forms of transcendental realization that exclude this are therefore inferior. And any form of transcendental practice that includes acknowledging the Supreme and relating to him in devotion is therefore bhakti. And the great thing about bhakti, among so many other things, is that knowledge and detachment come naturally. We see this. I've seen it so many times. I've seen it in literally every person I've witnessed practice bhakti. They start chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, with attention, a little bit, even a little bit of attention, even a little bit every day. They start practicing the primary angas practices of bhakti, and they start to recognize who they are and who they're not. What really serves them and what doesn't, and they get the power to actually to do that, even by degrees. It doesn't all happen right away. They don't just wake up one morning and like, oh yeah, so I'm a pure devotee of Krishna now, and I've completely changed. It happens step by step, but those steps are actually visible. They're tangible for the person going through it, and they're visible for everyone around them. And it's a beautiful thing, actually. And even if somebody had very little knowledge or very little detachment from lower values, we see that changes pretty quickly, actually. In the history of the Bhakti movement in the West, now like 60 years old, basically, at this point, 1965, Srila Prabhupada arrived, right? That's 50 years, 60 years. We see that when he arrived, historically speaking, people were pretty hell-bent on distracting themselves with, where he went at that time was like right in the middle of the hippie culture. There's a lot of drugs, a lot of like trying to use sex and drugs and different things to just kind of, even just as an attempt to transcend. And so what happened was a lot of the people who came and were attracted to him, just kind of demographically, were really distracted, really not even honestly able to function in society in a sober and like present way. A lot of them were just strung out, and And that's by their own admission. Then they came, they liked him, they thought what he's presenting is cool. They started practicing it. And pretty quickly they started to sober up as human beings, recognize some deep things, apply them in their lives, and grow. And that's not by any material intervention. Although those things aren't bad, it's not a bad thing to have a material intervention. Bhakti is the ultimate spiritual intervention, however. And we see this actually in the recovery movement. You know, AA was founded by Christian bhaktas, devotees of God, and who were inspired by the Christian tradition and acknowledge that submission to higher power and accepting help from them actually helps you when you realize and you admit that you have a problem in your relationship, your toxic relationship with alcohol. And then, of course, the principles were then applied to unhealthy relationships, to drugs or sex or food or whatever. And that's a bhakti principle, to accept the presence of higher power and to try to be of service to them, and to, based on that relationship, to grow out of inferior attachments and to grow into knowledge and higher attachment. And it works. It just works. Even scientifically, there's a great deal of evidence that this model works. And the secret that is there in that model is the secret in this verse. Bhakti transcends our own personal limitations, right? Other processes, material processes, by definition, do not transcend our limitations. They operate within them. They operate bounded by our own capacity for knowledge, bounded by our own capacity of how detached we are from lower habits, bounded by where we happen to be in relationship to the three modes of nature at any given time. Asking somebody to operate on the level of knowledge and detachment presumes that they're able to operate there already because of their capacity of being in the mode of goodness. That's just not true, everybody. Therefore, it's actually a kind of sectarianism. It's like going to a university, college, and getting like a very intellectual presentation for a technically skilled and proficient audience is a form of specialization, and that's fine and good, but it's not universally applicable. It's not actually an answer for a lot of people. This is why academia is accused of being ivory tower, because sometimes because a lot of the discourse remains theoretical and remains applicable only for a select few, if any. Bhakti is not limited in that way. It's applicable for everybody. That's why Prabhupada says it's simultaneously sublime and easy. It's sublime for the pure devotees who are serious about getting in contact with the Supreme Lord, and it's easy for the neophytes who are just on the threshold of the house of Bhakti. Somebody can walk in and be like, honestly, like a hippie in 1965, strung out, confused, literally high, not able to understand more than 80% of the words coming out of somebody's mouth, and still they get something. And their sincerity guides them to make really rapid spiritual advancement that one cannot estimate how much more quickly that is than whatever kind of material intervention could have helped them. And then somebody who's actually on the level of Brahmabhuta Prasannatmana Shochiti Nakamshiti, they've realized they're not their body. They've realized that there is no satisfaction to be had in the world, that they actually are already in touch with Brahman. They already recognize that they're spirit and they're in touch with the Supreme Spirit, and they want to know what to do next. For them, bhakti is like the final step. They start practicing pure devotion to Lord. It's not pure because they're not mixed with any other motivation, and they become pure devotees very quickly. And if they got there through their gyan practice of being liberated, great. And if they got liberated from matter through their bhakti practice itself, also fine. Bhakti itself gives knowledge and detachment. So even if you're not liberated from matter, you get there from bhakti practice. You don't have to go anywhere else. You don't actually have to get a degree in something else. You don't have to specialize. This universal practice contains within it the means to actually come to liberation itself. And so that means that it contains solutions for spiritual problems and also a great deal of practical advice for material problems. Bhakti culture is a culture that allows one to exist within the mode of goodness. So, and the reason for that is because the mode of goodness is the highest mode. It's the one that helps us to stay stable in the world, and it's the closest to transcendence. So advanced devotees operate within a good mode of goodness lifestyle. And so they also are skilled, therefore, at addressing material problems. When people have problems in their relationships, when people have problems with their mind, people have problems with their diet, with their health, it's fundamentally, sure, we can say it's fundamentally because of a disconnection from Krishna, but in terms of the mechanics of the world, it's because of a connection to the lower modes of nature. It's a lack of knowledge and a lack of detachment from the lower modes of nature. Sattva good lifestyle, mode of goodness lifestyle helps one be healthy, helps one to have better relationships, helps one to have a functional mind, because the balance point of the mind and the body and the relationships and money and sex and food, it exists in the mode of goodness. It's only because of inferior application of the modes of nature, inferior techniques, inferior knowledge, that we're less healthy or less happy materially. And devotees, they understand that. That's a secondary aspect of what they understand, because the primary aspect is they understand Krishna. They understand Krishna, but because they're situated that way, they also have a knowledge of mode of goodness lifestyle, so that therefore they can and do help other people to solve their material problems. But their fundamental advice is, if you really want to solve your problems, solve them at the level of turning to Krishna, turning to higher power, and let that trickle down, because then you'll feel spiritual joy and you'll feel the ingress of his support. And that will actually affect you in a lot of different aspects of your life that may appear to be disconnected from spiritual practice. This is the great mystery of bhakti and of spirituality, that it's not just a thing for Sundays, or if you're Muslim, Fridays, or whatever else happens to be a holy day or a holy holiday for you. It's actually a lifestyle that, if practiced purely, puts us in touch with Krishna, as the previous verse said, without interruption. It's actually available all the time. It's not just like a flash in the pan kind of like, oh wow, that was really cool kind of experience. What if you could actually experience that all the time? That's what bhakti is offering. And the way to do that is by accepting and asking for the help of higher power, Krishna. And the effect of that is that you get that help. So one way of understanding that for us, ground level right now, 2025, Burlington, Vermont, or wherever you're calling in from, or listening in from on YouTube, is when you're looking at the practice of bhakti, you're looking at something like chanting Hare Krishna. This is a really fundamental thing that people practice Krishna bhakti do. Okay, so I'm going to be honest with you about what I thought when I heard about that. I thought, people are chanting these mantras. This mantra is cool. Like, I like it. I hear it in kirtan. This is really there's something there. Okay, but they're chanting this mantra for like sometimes 2 hours a day. Serious devotees who have taken vows. I thought, there is literally no way I can ever do that. Zero way I can do that. I just don't have time for this. I cannot find the time for that. And I was right and I was wrong. I was right because there's no way I could do that materially under my own power. And I was wrong because what I experienced by gradually I did come to the level, and I'm at the level of chanting about 2 hours a day, actually a little more. I'm a little slower. But what I realized is that it's an empowered activity. It's actually an empowered activity. It's actually not an activity performed exclusively under our own power. You try chanting 2 hours of a made-up mantra, you'll run very quickly against the limitations of your body and mind. But you're chanting Hare Krishna, especially if you chant with some sincerity and intention, you run very quickly into the effect of Krishna's support. And that breaks the math of it completely apart. All of a sudden, yeah, you spent whatever it was, 2 minutes, 24 minutes, 2 hours, whatever you happen to put into the mantra, if you put it in with intention especially, all of a sudden what you find is you get that time back. How? Because the same mind you're using throughout the rest of your day becomes purified. All of a sudden you have the support of being less distracted, being more on point, ordering your tasks better, being clearer, less time in depression or confusion or brain fog or anxiety. I mean, I'm not the only person. I see people nodding their heads when I'm saying this. This is what happens when you chant Hare Krishna. And Hare Krishna, this is a bhakti mantra. This is bhakti intentionality. Actually, this happens even if you don't chant Hare Krishna. If you start to hang out with the devotees with the intention of serving. If you like Narada Muni did when he was a child, just like listened and offered service and with respect took the remnants of food of the devotees. This is a way of offering respect, is taking somebody's food remnants, take their prasadam. You actually make spiritual advancement that way too. Your mind becomes purified that way. You get support. You grow out of your own shell, your own material mold, your own karma, your own limitations. So this is what bhakti is offering. It's the ultimate kind of self-help because it accepts the help of the supreme self. What could be better than that? Otherwise, self-help is not a bad thing, but if it's self-directed, small s self-directed, then it's very limited, and we quickly run up against our own limitations, and it becomes depressing or challenging. Like we see people who, like I've seen this in my experience. I worked in the nonprofit sector. I worked at the Toronto Vegetarian Association and other kind of associations of people who are really dedicated to helping the world become better in a mode of goodness way, in very specific ways. And their science was really good. It's a fact, for example, that eating a plant-based diet better for the environment, better for your health. It's not debatable. If we want to talk science, I can go on about that all day. I have a master's on that topic. However, what Bhakti would say about that is that here, what I'd say first is the persons who are trying to help people to be vegetarian or whatever, or see how this is just better, were rapidly becoming frustrated. And the ones who've been most entrenched in that lifestyle or that kind of advocacy were the most bitter people. And I saw that because they're running their head up against the wall of people's material limitations. When you're preaching to people a message they're not ready to hear, they're in a mode that's lower. They just can't take it. Even if they have the knowledge, they don't have the detachment to practice it because you're running up against their material qualifications, right? And bhakti is not like that because we're not just waiting for someone to get their act together and become clean enough and detached enough so they can actually start to practice a mode of goodness lifestyle. We meet them where they are in the trenches. And I mean, not we do it, Krishna does it. So this is the nature of the bhakti culture. So just to summarize, we heard about how knowledge and detachment are concomitant. They actually follow bhakti, and they're not the cause of bhakti. They're actually an effect of bhakti, and therefore it's a non-sectarian practice because it doesn't exclude anybody. Unlike going to a class for specialists or whatever, it's not based on your own karma or your own level of work and your own relationship with the modes of nature. And so it's practical and easy for the neophyte, and it's also sublime for the very advanced practitioner. And it helps one get to material detachment and knowledge, i.e., the platform of liberation, which Krishna says is the place from which you can really have the springboard to pure devotional service. Om Tat Sat. Let's get some comments or questions, reflections. Bhakti culture, knowledge and detachment, cultivation of the positive, letting go of the negative.
Prabhupada used the word cult so many times in the purport and without the context, or and it can be very misinterpreted. And so
we're in a cult.
Yeah.
We actually are, in a good way.
Right. Because it's a culture, right? Which I also really appreciate in you sharing that bhakti in our practice is not just for holy days or festivals, right? But it's to be practiced every day and to be felt every day, right? And sometimes we can get into, or sometimes I can get, I'll speak for myself, get into habits or routines where the feeling isn't as there as much, right? Because it becomes like, this is the structure of the practice that I do, which is meant to lead to emotion and deepening of that. Which is why having things like the Japa workshop tomorrow, right? To like get more into the essence and the emotion of what's being given to us, right? If we actually will surrender, and the more we do it, then the more knowledge and detachment that comes. It's sort of like you said, it's bhakti's both the goal and the means to the goal.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Um, when we talk about, like, for example, when we use the word cult, what we're talking about is some culture in the mode of ignorance where, you know, one of the fundamental aspects of a cult is that your freedom is restricted.
Right.
You don't really
You don't have choice.
explicitly or implicitly, there's some forces at work that um, discourage free thought, encourage obedience, blind obedience. And if that's like in a religious or spiritual context, then that's spirituality in the mode of ignorance. Like follow, otherwise be violence, or you'll be judged. Like you don't want to be judged, you want to be accepted, right? So that's cultish. And what it comes down to is a culture in the modes of nature. That's, let's say, spirituality. It could be like a material cult. It doesn't have to do with God, but let's say it's in a spiritual context. That's spirituality in the mode of ignorance. It's described in the third canto of Bhagavatam. There's also spirituality in the mode of passion, where the predominant motivation is of gain, not fear of loss. It's gain. It's like, I'll be a good person so I can go to heaven or whatever, or I worship God so I can gain in this world or in the next. Mode of goodness is it's because it's the right thing to do. It's duty. It's moral, and actual bhakti is not motivated by any of those things in the modes. It's actually motivated by love for Krishna. And love for Krishna, if you don't have it, you can get it by practicing bhakti. And if you have a little tiny bit of sincere connection to Krishna, I've seen everybody has this actually. Everybody who practices bhakti has a tiny bit of sincerity in their heart. That cuts right through all of your desire for like, I've got to be okay in the world. I'm afraid I can't be like this. I can't that. Like all the fear, all the mode of ignorance stuff. It cuts through all the like greedy, lusty, want to get this, profit, mode of passion stuff. It cuts through the proud, noble, and peaceful Om Shanti mode of goodness stuff, and it gets right to the essence. And that's what real spiritual culture is. Drama free. It doesn't crack the whip at anybody. It doesn't wag the finger at anybody. And at the same time, it's offering practical solutions. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
More reflections.
So like just the reminder
Can I
that
speak?
Sure, go ahead.
Hi, from the dark here. What I find really comforting is that as you chant, as you do good, you are I mean, it's your connection with Krishna, but it's also this beautiful calming effect of being with like-minded people, and it's like a mini bliss, if I want to describe it.
Nice.
Mm.
Yeah. It's scientifically, it's actually a fundamental aspect of bhakti that associating with devotees helps you advance. It's discussed in Shastra in scientific terms, and it's one of the first things we notice. Very early on, we just start associating. We're like, this feels good. I like these people. I feel good. I feel accepted. Or I feel like somehow or other it feels right that I'm around people who share these values, and it's natural because materially we're social beings, and spiritually we're ultimately social beings too. And so that sangha is always just like a really practical touchstone. And because it's so fundamental, and because it's one of the ways where Krishna meets us, where we're at, it's so important to be in touch with sangha regularly. And it's a regular realization that we have. If I were giving this class or talking about this verse to myself, there would be real spiritual value in me for it, in that activity. But there's more because I'm looking at all of you, and my sense after giving classes or whatever for all these years is that Krishna inspires deeper realizations in me because I'm talking to other parts and parcels of his who he cares for deeply. What to speak of when there starts to be a question and answer, reflection period. There's something really ineffable of what happens when two or more people get together. There's a synergistic way in which it's more than the sum of their parts. Even materially, we see that, it's just a natural thing that happens. but spiritually it's like way more, because then you just drop all the bound. Like you can have people who are so completely different materially in the same room. If they're interested in being in a kirtan together, something amazing happens and they all synergize. That they don't speak the same language. They have completely different political ideologies. One is 99 years old, one is 6 years old. You know, it's like gay, straight, old, young, female, black, white. It doesn't matter. All that doesn't matter. And they synergize. So
I think if we bring this to the world, think
What's
about that.
She said, think if we bring this to the world.
that's right.
What we're
Yeah.
trying to do.
That's what we're trying to do. Because it really helps. We gotta hand it, but Martin's next, and then we've got Mel.
I was just gonna say quick, I like the reminder of knowledge and detachment are just byproducts, not just, but they are byproducts of bhakti, and like surrender and grace and practice are like where the real transformation like really not begin, but that's where it's really at. Is like it's the last thing he said in the purport there was bhakti is the supermost occupation of the human being. So it's like you can gain knowledge and you can detach all you want, but it's like bhakti is really like the supermost job.
Yeah, so in terms of what to do, Bhakti is the answer.
Yeah.
In terms of how to understand how you're making advancement, you can see like it's not a bad idea to see how your knowledge and detachment are growing as a result.
Yeah.
But not putting the cart before the horse and saying, oh now I'm getting knowledge and detachment, so actually now I'm getting the real thing.
Yeah.
It's like no, the real thing is the devotion. And that devotion leads to Bhakti, at least in the knowledge and detachment. That's how it works. We don't find the opposite relationship. We don't find that somebody who cultivates knowledge and detachment develops bhakti necessarily. They require bhakti practice. They require association with it. It's completely required to have that. And they don't require knowledge and detachment, because one who doesn't have that can still practice bhakti and then develop that knowledge later.
I think you said it. You said bhakti transcends limitations,
It does.
and I think that's it. That's the crux of it is our occupation.
Thank you. Because sometimes we're going to have knowledge, and sometimes even if we've had it for a while, we'll lose it. Sometimes you fall into a lower mode of nature. Anybody ever have that happen to them? Not just me. Sometimes you're like, oh man. Whether you just woke up or you get blasted by some life event, whatever, Bhakti can still meet you there. You can't show up to work drunk. But you could stagger into a bhakti program intoxicated and you can still get benefit. Krishna will meet you there. He will meet you there. I've seen it. So yeah. Mel.
Good morning, Haribol.
Good morning, Haribol.
It's interesting because Siddhanta and I were talking about this yesterday, so it's really amazing that it's like here this morning. And he was sharing about how, because he's been doing this for a really long time, and he was sharing about how the depths of his realizations are deeply personal, right? It's a really, really, really personal experience, as it is for all of us. And he was explaining that how, as he's gotten more advanced and he's deepened in his bhakti, that it's become this more like increasingly falling into that like mode of like sattvic mode, right? And so we were talking about sharing with one another and sharing about realizations, and we went off and started talking about nectar of instruction and about confidential sharing and like the really importance of that, and how it's really beautiful when you can witness the different levels of bhakti and you can witness it because and hold space for it and really see what bhakti is all about, because it's just like this whole verse is talking about. It's approachable for everybody in different ways, and as somebody deepens in their bhakti and advances in their bhakti, it shifts ever so slightly and in different ways, and it's really magnificent if you see it, and the purity that comes through that. And just like you were talking about, Martin said, like the daily occupation of bhakti, like I was literally just running out the door to go to work, and Siddhanta was chanting bhajans at the altar to the deities. And like that's the nature of progress and progression in this material world. And it's extremely beautiful. And thank you for this morning.
Hi. Thank you for reflecting that. Yeah, you can't pay for that kind of association. There's no material price. It's just it's incredibly powerful and valuable. And I really like what you said about in reference to the nectar of instruction, that confidentially opening your heart and receiving the contents of another person's heart in confidence is a loving exchange. Rupa Goswami tells us. And in terms of bhakti, it's so valuable to see how Krishna is manifesting in other people's lives, because it confirms what you're experiencing. It confirms the process. It confirms Krishna's nature, and we need that. We need that. We can't live in a cave and just experience them on our own. That's a very narrow, actually, expression of bhakti. Somebody who really wants to love Krishna, that desire is symptomized by a desire to be around other people and hear their realizations and help other people come into their own relationship with Krishna. Like ultimately, what Srila Prabhupada is doing here, these purports, what the devotees of Lord Chaitanya are doing, is they're giving people the opportunity to bring Krishna into their heart and experience their own completely unique realizations, like Krishna wants them to have. We don't know what Krishna wants this person to have. We have no idea, but we know it's going to be good, whatever it is. And when we see that in someone's life, when we hear that, we receive that, it's really powerful. Whether they're senior to us and we're like, oh wow, like look how bhakti has moved in this person's life for decades. That's incredibly fortifying. Or they're junior to us, it's actually incredibly fortifying that way too, to see how they rapidly make advancement in the process, works again in a new context, and then they say something that you're like, oh, I never thought about it that way. That seems so simple, but it's so beautiful. Like, what is it Martin said the other day? He said, it's better to share than to know.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was, right? Yeah. So that's a powerful realization. Or among your peers also. And in any of these dynamics, there's a great deal of value to be had. So thank you. Any more reflections of anything that stood out or questions? A low battery warning. Just in
Looks
time.
like Leanne is speaking.
Oh yeah, you're muted.
I muted myself again, sorry. um, I just really love, there's so much in here, but the pure devotional service is the way to know Krishna the way he is. So through pure devotional service, he lets you see him truly how he is. And then I think that's just so beautiful, because as you continue to go through, like for myself, definitely it's like an opening up of like these doorways that I am experiencing through the practice. And each doorway I can, like, I don't know, there's like a different realization, or he's just showing me himself in a different way each time,
Yeah.
but like in progression sort of. So.
Yeah, when I quoted from Bhagavad Gita 1855 that the platform of liberation is freedom from lower attachments, and then from that level one can actually practice bhakti. And then he says bhakti mama vijanati in the next verse, yavanyash chatmi tattvataha. And it's by this practice of bhakti that one can know me tattvataha, in truth, as I am. And Krishna, he makes that statement for us to understand. That's how you can really know who I am. So the realizations that a devotee has, that's why the realizations, as Mel was talking about with Siddhanta Prabhu, that's why the realizations are very personal, because it's the accumulated experience of Krishna revealing himself. And that's a very personal thing. Just like in any relationship, like someone for a long time, you've been there for them, they've been there for you, and you've heard the contents of their heart. You can't just walk into that relationship and get it. You can't crash that party. There's something very special happening between those people. And the thing about a relationship with Krishna is that's also true. And it does create capacity to help others and support them, and having their own unique experience of seeing Krishna like manifest in their life in special ways. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's the most fun you'll ever have. Just saying. Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Jai,
Samveda Bhaktivinoda ki jai.
Jai.
Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripasinubhye vacha patitanam bhavnebhyo vaishnavibhyo. Hare Krishna.